Now I'll read the English translation of this song that I just presented to you. Many of you have read the autobiography, are already familiar perhaps with what I'm about to read. It's a very famous line from the AY. You can control a mad elephant. You can shut the mouth of a bear and the tiger. You can ride a lion. You can play with the cobra. By alchemy, you can eke out your livelihood. You can wander through the universe incognito. You can make vassals of the gods. You can ever be youthful. You can walk on water, live in fire, but control of the mind is better and more difficult. Certainly a very challenging poem, as Yoganandaji puts it. And it is exactly the topic that we are about to discuss today. As you all might remember, we are in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where we are talking about the nature of true yoga and of meditation. And as I've been sharing the past few weeks, this chapter, as I'm reading it, is full of a lot of practical advice that Krishna offers to Arjuna and to all of us. Because Krishna gets really to the details of how you practice, what do you do, what do you not do. And as he is describing all of this, Arjuna asks the age-old question of every meditation student. I don't think it has changed in the last 2,000, 3,000 years. How do you control the mind? How do you concentrate? I've been teaching meditation for a few years, and I can certainly tell you, when you teach a technique, you ask people to concentrate, focus at their point between the eyebrows, and practice whatever technique it is. They'll all do it, and the first question you have is, how do I concentrate? My thoughts are running wild. I cannot control the mind. So Arjuna's question is not very different. So I'm going to share with you the verse now and the literal translation before sharing any more. This is verse 34 of the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and mostly we are looking at lines that Krishna speaks. Even today we are going to, but this particular verse is in Arjuna's voice. Arjuna is saying these words to Krishna. Chanchalam hi manaha Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayo riva sudushkaram. And I am going to read the English translation as written by Swami Kriyananda. Wait a minute, which verse is this? I'm sorry, this is verse 34. Yeah, Arjuna says to Krishna, Verily, the mind is restless, tumultuous, powerfully stubborn. O Krishna, I consider it to be as difficult as to master the wind. So this is Arjuna speaking to Krishna. And as much as it is phrased as a question, as Swamiji explains in the commentary for this verse, the answer for the question is also hidden in the question itself. We'll come to that in a bit. In the Gita and in general, the image, both in Hinduism and even in a lot of other Eastern traditions, especially in Tibetan Buddhism and other Zen traditions also, the mind is often referred to as the monkey mind, especially when referring to meditation and to the act of concentration. And I've been thinking about that just yesterday and today morning as I was preparing for this talk on this particular verse of the Gita. I don't know how many of you have seen monkeys or traveled in India. I certainly have, and I can tell you why that image is so perfect. When you see a monkey, you're often seeing the monkey perched on top of a building or on a tree or something. It's always looking at everything happening below it or around the monkey, and the monkey is rather distracted. The monkey is very intense and focused for brief moments of time. That's the truth. If you're holding a banana or if you're holding some food or a bag or whatever it is, the monkey is immediately attracted to you. It immediately starts focusing on you. But then as it is looking at whatever it is that you're holding, it is also having its vision in the periphery. It is also thinking about a lot of other things. It's making a lot of these calculations on whether it can reach this food or not. And if there was a different person with another bag standing next to you, it'll immediately go there. The monkey mind has an intent to concentrate. It can focus, but it's also easily distracted, and it's stubborn. The monkey is very, very hard to control. in my own mother tongue. Another beautiful image that is given of a monkey is, we always say as an expression, like a flower garland in the hands of a monkey. You know, a monkey, and again, this is something that you have to actually watch to see what a monkey does with a flower garland. Somehow when you give a flower garland to a monkey, it becomes very curious, and it thinks there's something in this garland, and it starts picking it apart. And then before you realize, there's nothing there except a thread. And that's what the mind does. The mind picks things apart. The mind is constantly distracted. And as Arjuna says here, the mind is powerfully stubborn. How do we control this mind? And even before we talk about techniques for controlling the mind, it is important for us to acknowledge this principle, because this is not a beginner's meditation question. Arjuna has had, in fact, a lot of training even in the Bhagavad Gita, 5 chapters of Krishna lecturing to him, and he's a great soul. He is himself a realized being. And he is asking this question to Krishna, how can I control the mind? You're talking about meditation, and this comes right after those verses that we have been looking at, where Krishna is telling Arjuna, you have to sit, you have to relax your body, you have to sit with a straight spine, you have to focus your attention at the point between the eyebrows, and all the other tips for practicing meditation. And Arjuna is telling Krishna, well, I can do all of this, but I cannot control the mind. And this is an important factor for us to consider, because Krishna is going to answer this question, which is probably the most important part of this section of the Bhagavad Gita. But what we want to consider is this fact, this truth, that the mind is difficult to master, that the mind cannot be controlled in the abstract. And here is where I see, even after thousands of years, there is a fair amount of confusion on what meditation is and what meditation practices are. This is not a commentary on any tradition or any broad religious system or spiritual practice, but specifically on how people approach it and the specifics of how meditation is often practiced. In many schools of mindfulness, often the advice or the guideline for practicing meditation is observe your thoughts. Now, as somebody who has practiced meditation every day for many, many years now, all I can tell you is try it. Try observing your thoughts. And I heard something even more, to me, which sounded ridiculous, which is, let every thought pass through your mind and just keep watching the thoughts. Now, I have to say, it is not bad advice. It is a practice of contemplation. It is something that one can do in order to center, develop self-awareness, introspect. These are all valid spiritual practices. It is not that it would be harmful for you to sit and watch your thoughts. You might learn a lot of things just by watching your thoughts. But does that count as meditation? Does that qualify and give all the benefits that Krishna is talking about in the Bhagavad Gita? Well, the straightforward answer is no, and I'm going to share a little bit more from the autobiography of a yogi also with you. And the reason is because the mind is difficult to control. It is difficult to master. We can develop self-awareness, we can introspect, we can learn a lot about ourselves, and perhaps even have some mental clarity by observing our thoughts or just by working with the mind in and of itself. But it is impossible to bring that mind into control. It is impossible to just control the monkey by looking at the monkey. You have to do something else with the monkey if you want to really make the monkey sit and, control its energies, control its senses. And the answer, as I was saying, is in Arjuna's question itself, where he says, the mind is as difficult to control as the wind. And Swami Kriyananda explains, this is what Yoganandaji also wrote in his commentary, which is what Swami Kriyananda's commentary is, but Yoganandaji makes explicit references to this in many of his writings as well, where he talks about this idea of the wind that Krishna is referring to is the prana in our own body. And the key to controlling the mind, the key to calming the mind lies in calming the prana. It lies in gaining control over the prana. Now, when I use the word prana, I'm talking about the subtle life force flowing in the body, but as often translated, this wind element is also the breath. And I think we have already discussed this in this series. Pranayama is often in India translated as the control of breath, whereas in its truest sense, pranayama is the control of life force. It is the awareness and the sensitive control of that life force flowing in our own body. Now, it is not all that inaccurate to call it the control of breath, because it is the physical breath through which we access that life force, because that life force is also, just like the mind, oftentimes when we are in the physical body, a little abstract, a little difficult to get a handle on, whereas the physical breath is more tangible. It is something that we can easily work with. So when Arjuna says the mind is as difficult to control as the wind, he's giving us a clue. It is as difficult to control as the wind, but you see, you have more practical ways to control this wind. The mind, on the other hand, we do not have those inherent tools and faculties to control the mind in the abstract. So if we were to focus, if we were to concentrate in meditation, we want to start working with the breath. You know, we have a school here. I am speaking to you right now from the Palo Alto community of Ananda, and we have a school that is founded based on Yoganandaji's principles of education called the Living Wisdom School. And many, many teachers here have shared with me so many stories of children in the school and how they absorb these teachings of meditation and of yoga. And one of the teachers has shared many stories with me. She also shares it in her public talks of how the most powerful idea that the children hold on to, and what really changes how they look at life and how they work with themselves, is this idea of working with one's own breath. I'll share just a couple of short stories with you from what this teacher shared with me. You know, when once a child, perhaps in the kindergarten, 3 or 4 years old, the mother was in a hurry that morning, and she was trying to pack the lunch and, you know, dress the child up and get everybody out of the door, take the child to the school and all of that. And this small girl, you know, as she was watching her mommy, you know, run around, and apparently she immediately told her mommy, I think the mommy was looking for her shoes and she was not able to find it, and she was getting stressed about that. And the little girl told her mommy, "Mommy, take a deep breath. It's okay, take a deep breath." Now, you know, deep truths from the mouths of babes, that child was sharing with her mother something so simple but also very profound. If only we could remember that that key for calming ourselves is always with us. It is the breath. And another time she was describing once when kids were all playing in the playground, one of the kids fell down and got hurt, and the child started crying. You know, the child was bleeding. And I've heard this from living wisdom teachers often. Even before they rush in to help the child. Of course, if the child is really hurt and you know, the wound is bigger, they would rush right away. But if it is smaller, you know, children tend to exaggerate and are a little more dramatic when they respond to their own injuries like that. The teachers wait for a few seconds. They wait and watch how the child responds, and also they give the opportunity for the other children to jump in and act in that situation. And as this teacher described, as this child fell down and she got a little hurt and she was crying, another girl went up to her and she just, you know, placed her hands on the shoulder and started telling this girl who was hurt, you know, take a deep breath, start breathing. You know, how practical that advice is. And what Arjuna is asking Krishna and telling all of us through this verse, as he refers to this metaphor of the wind, is that same principle. That wind is always with us. And as we can start working with that prana, with that life force through the physical breath, then we can control the mind, then we can start calming ourselves. Now I'm going to share with you a little bit from my favorite chapter in the Gita. As I'm saying this, it's likely that I might have shared these same lines from the autobiography with you in a previous episode. I don't remember, but it's perfect for what I'm saying right now, so I'm going to read it anyway. Let's see, this is from chapter 26 of the autobiography of a yogi, the chapter on Kriya Yoga. And it's my favorite because it's a chapter that has so much teaching in every single line, every single paragraph, and a lot of deep truths that Yoganandaji presents for all of us to learn from. Here's what he writes. Untying the cord of breath which binds the soul to the body, Kriya Yoga serves to prolong life and enlarge our consciousness to infinity. The yoga method overcomes the tug-of-war between the mind and the matter-bound senses, and frees the devotee to inherit his eternal kingdom. He knows his real nature is bound neither by physical encasement nor by breath, symbolic of the mortal enslavement to air, nature's elemental compulsion. It's beautiful how Master expresses that. Untying that cord of breath which binds the body to the soul. That is the key phrase that I wanted to bring all of our attention to. That cord of breath is what ties us all together. That cord of prana ties all levels of existence together, from the physical to the astral to the ultimate soul level. All of it is animated and tied together with that thread of prana. And when we use our physical breath and are able to practice meditation or a technique such as Kriya Yoga, if that's what you practice, of course there's nothing better than that. But even simply observing the breath or practicing pranayama techniques, or as we have been discussing in a few episodes before, the balancing of prana and apana currents. I think the last episode or the one before that, we discussed the pranayama technique of Nadi Shodhanam, where we breathe through alternate nostrils, which is one of the ways in which prana and apana, the two currents of the life force within our body, can be brought into a state of balance. So whatever the techniques are, the purpose and the goal that we are trying to attain is untying the cord of breath which binds the soul to the body. And Master goes on to say, introspection or sitting in the silence is an unscientific way of trying to force apart the mind and senses tied together by life force. It's one of my favorite lines in the autobiography. I'm going to read it again because what else can I say to explain this verse? Introspection or sitting in the silence is an unscientific way of trying to force apart the mind and senses tied together by life force. The contemplative mind, attempting its return to divinity, is constantly dragged back toward the senses by the life currents. And this is where that image of monkey is perfect, because what pulls the monkey is not actually its own mind, but its senses, the life force that is constantly directed outward, that seeking out in the world, and that seeking which expresses through the senses. That's what distracts the mind. That's what keeps drawing that monkey mind constantly out. In fact, even in the beginning of Gita, this is something we may have discussed in the first chapter of the Gita as I was explaining some of the symbolism. Arjuna is sitting in this chariot. The 5 horses that Krishna is reining in are the 5 senses. And, Arjuna is called, one of the names, Krishna uses a lot of names to refer to Arjuna. One of the names is Kapidwaja. Kapi is monkey, and Arjuna is often referred to in the Mahabharata and the Gita as Kapidwaja. Dwaja is a flag. So this chariot of Arjuna that he's riding in the battlefield of Mahabharata has a flag with the emblem of a monkey. And what that means is that he has conquered and gained victory over that monkey mind, because that is an essential qualification for us to be able to learn these deep spiritual truths and to practice meditation. Now, before I end, I also want to read, as I promised, some of Krishna's responses to this question, which are important for us to hear as well, although Arjuna has already planted a clue in his own question, because these are verses that I might not get to visit in the next week. Krishna goes on to say, I'm going to read the English translation of these verses. O mighty-armed Arjuna, this is verse 35 of chapter 6. Krishna's response right after Arjuna asks that question. O mighty-armed Arjuna, the mind is undoubtedly fickle and unruly, but it can be controlled by yoga practice and the exercise of mental dispassion. The two Sanskrit words that we use here, yoga abhyasa, abhyasa and mental dispassion, which is vairagya. Now, that word abhyasa or yoga practice is really important, because this is what, again, as I'm chuckling because I'm just realizing what deep, profound spiritual truths that we share even as teachers that might teach beginning meditation, because often what we tell our students is keep practicing. Keep practicing, keep coming back to it, keep coming back to your breath. Of course, it's going to be difficult, and it's never going to be easy. Even somebody who has meditated for 50, 60 years might tell you it's not easy to conquer the mind. That's what Arjuna is saying here. But after a few months, you will realize it's also not as difficult as I'd imagined, because once we have these tools, once we have these techniques, and as we keep practicing, we start gaining little by little self-mastery. The self-mastery is not an all or nothing game. It's not that I cannot control the mind and suddenly, after practicing meditation for 18 years, I'm in a state of samadhi. Even through those years, through those days and weeks and months of practicing meditation, we see progressive improvement in our own ability to master the prana, in our own ability to control our thoughts, to calm ourselves at will. And that's what Krishna is promising to Arjuna here. And the next verse, verse 36 of chapter 6, here is my promise. This is Krishna promising to Arjuna. Yoga, though difficult to attain for the unbridled mind, can be reached through proper methods if one strives earnestly to achieve self-control. I want to read the Sanskrit verse also because it's a beautiful verse of the Gita. Asamyatatmana yogo dushprapa iti me matihi vashyatmana yuyata shakyo vaptum upayataha. The reason I wanted to read this verse is because as I was going through the verses of Gita and this commentary, I was drawn to this particular phrase, iti me matihi. This is Krishna telling Arjuna, this is my declaration, this is my promise, and this is an avatar. And that's what I wanted to end this discussion with. This is an avatar promising to us, because this task of controlling the mind, this task of focusing and concentrating one-pointedly, as Patanjali describes, as we learn in meditation, as we are told in every single tradition of mysticism and meditation that we are supposed to do, it is so arduous, it is difficult, and the mind is powerfully stubborn, so it feels impossible. And that is one of the unfortunate reasons why, as one of my friends put it, when he asked somebody if they meditate, they said, I've tried it, in past tense, meaning to say, I tried, but somehow it did not work for me. And that's why a lot of people, although they understand the scientific, metaphysical, spiritual benefits of meditation, they do not practice it regularly because they lose hope. They think it is impossible and they cannot conquer or control their mind. But I want all of us to hear this. This is Krishna declaring to Arjuna, here is my promise. Yoga, though difficult to attain for the ungoverned mind, if one strives through proper methods, he says, upayataha, these techniques and methods that have been taught to us through the system of yoga, if one tries that, it is not impossible. I promise you, Arjuna, that you can control the mind, and it is a promise for all of us, to myself, and as I'm sharing with you, to all of you as well. For us to always remember, even in those difficult moments, no matter how stressed we are, no matter how terrible we think our meditation practice is and how difficult it is seeming in the moment, as we keep striving earnestly, as Krishna puts it, as we keep using these techniques of yoga, control of mind is not impossible, and as he promised, one day we will attain it. So with that, I'll end this episode. I'll see all of you with a different verse, probably from the 6th chapter again in the next upcoming week. God bless you all.